I am an ordained minister here in the United States, specifically here in metropolitan Detroit, Michigan. And my doctorate, um, my Doctor of Ministry degree, for that project, I focused on domestic abuse in Christian homes. Because as I was growing up, I grew up in a home where we went to church, we were active in our church, and yet there was domestic abuse in our home. And growing up as a child, you are taught what happens in the home stays in the home, and so it caused me to compartmentalize my relationship with God, my relationship with friends and family, and then my relationship inside of our home. Because there were certain conversations that I could not have. I did not feel safe having those conversations, and I knew better than to tell anyone what was happening inside of our home. And so when it was time for me to focus on a topic for my doctoral study, my mind was already focused on domestic abuse in Christian homes because
So I have, in addition to Dr. April, I am the senior pastor of the Destiny House Christian Center. And as a senior leader, the focus of my particular church is to really use biblical principles and the word of the Lord to develop destiny within people. We certainly, in studying specifically the New Testament, we learn that not only does God love us, but God has gifted all of us with something very specific. And he has a divine plan that's attached to our life, giving us not just the physical DNA, but also a spiritual DNA. However, because we are also in the flesh, it is up to us to do the work, to discover, to fulfill, and to eventually be very deliberate about fulfilling whatever it is our divine purpose. So how does that look in everyday life when we often have to deal with just the things that life brings to us that's common to most people? Work, family, career, but then we have internal issues. And when life that is challenging in and of itself without any interruption, how does it look when one is endeavoring to fulfill their destiny when they have been traumatized? When they have been traumatized, specifically, we are focusing on domestic violence. Within domestic violence,
one of the key factors in abuse being able to be so pervasive in our families is silence. The first part is denial. The second part is silence. And so, not to offend anyone, but oftentimes what we have labeled as generational curses are simply generational habits, bad habits that have been passed on from one generation to the next. It's because we tend not to have candid conversations within our families. There are certain things that we don't discuss. And I've spoken with Dr. Pepper about this before. There is a level of abuse that is acceptable in a Christian home. Children can be chastised and beaten. And some families, I don't know how it is over there in Australia or Africa, but in the U.S., there's a phrase that many people believe is biblical, but it is not, that says, spare the rod, spoil the child. That is not in the Bible. That scripture has been twisted, but it gives parents the permission to beat the children or to chastise the children using their hands or switches or belts, and some parents use shoes or whatever they can get their hands on. But my point being, we pass on these generational themes. So if violence is a theme within the family, if abuse has taken place with the grandmother and the grandfather, and then it happens in the next generation because the next generation has seen it. There are even times whereas a person has experienced one part of violence,
Right.
physical, and they'll say, well, I never want to experience that. Well, they'll go into another relationship, or they go into adult relationships and they experience other types of abuse, and they don't label it abuse because it
to create a culture for restoration and healing. I thought that was a very prolific statement that she said, right? Because we really can't control as children and even young people who we are born from, what family we hail from. We have no control over that. But we do have control over what we do with our past experiences. And so she eloquently talked about generational curses. They end up spiritually becoming curses, but why? Because they are generational habits and behaviors that went undealt with. And then when people don't have the strategies to unravel from them, we live out the curse.
Yes.
And it turns into a spiritual bondage.
Yes, it does.
And now we need spiritual entities to destroy it.
Yes.
So for the culture of restoration and healing, I would like to add one additional component to now answer your question, Marielle. How do we move forward? While I do support and agree and believe and am very deliberate about creating that kind of culture in my organization as well as in my church, I also, as a leader, specifically a spiritual leader, you still have to hold everybody accountable, even the victim. The actual emotional residue, and that is the rebuilding of a person's self-esteem.
Exactly.
And that person's self-esteem is so shattered that if we don't catch them in time, they go on thinking they could never be repaired, they're not worthy, and you become the victim of their anger. And you're telling them things to love on them, teaching them how to make decisions for themselves, how to live as an adult. But they have made up in their emotional mind, they want to be kids forever.
Right.
Exactly.
Because it was less painful back then. They're 40 and 30, 40 and 50, and they're extremely emotionally immature. And as a pastor, I get these people coming to me and they want me, because the adage of a pastor is to be so loving and tender. But no. My job is to get you where you are supposed to be in God.
Right.
And Paul said, when I was a child, I spake as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. I'm going to help you, and maybe I need to start in the playpen with you. But I'm not staying in the playpen with you, even if you are victimized.